even people that I hadn't seen or spoken to in over 10 years did actually give my name and my resume to someone, and I did get a call.
Figure out what you're really good at. Have that conversation on the side with people who are there to figure out what's the actual pain point, and then begin to move forward.
Remind yourself of what you actually want, not what other people think you should want, but actually sit down and think about what it is that you want and why, and keep visualizing that.
Hello. You're tuning into the Careering with Cameron podcast, your safe place to ask all the dumb questions about finding a job. Hey everybody, it's Kevin Cameron with Careering with Cameron. Thanks for joining us again for this episode. I am joined by Christine Avedissian, who is a former client and somebody that we've worked with through her career transition. And she graciously said, you know what? I would love to be on the show to share a little bit about what it's like to go through career transition, what has helped me, what was effective, maybe kind of how she's feeling through the whole process, but really be able to share with our audience who probably is in career transition at this point. What did you find that worked well and helped, and what would you recommend? So without further ado, Christine, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. So let's kind of jump right in, right? So tell us a little bit about your background and just to help the audience understand what you were doing so that they understand kind of how you're moving forward.
Yeah, sure. So I'm an in-house attorney that works in different companies in different industries. I worked in the entertainment industry for the first 10 years of my career. And then I transitioned into the medical space where I worked for a biopharmaceutical company. And then the last a company was called Gore. So I worked there for about 5 years until about January, which is when I was kind of going through that transition. So
was the transition process, was this the first time that you've gone through the career transition component?
It's not the first time.
Okay.
I think this was the second time, but I think the first time I was definitely in a different industry and at a different time, right? So I worked in the entertainment industry and I was working in a niche area that I had a lot of contacts. And so it was only like a month or so after that I was able to find a role. But I think this time, given how surprising it was to go through the process and just not being fully prepared, made it a little more challenging, as well as just the market in general and kind of what we're all seeing with the AI, how companies are just, continuously making those changes. So just added a little extra pressure.
Yeah. What was the biggest surprise that you faced in starting this process of finding a new position? Like if I said, there's lots of things that happen throughout this, right? But what's the one that you look back on, you're like, wow, I really didn't expect that to happen?
Yeah, I think it was the fact that, and I'm sure everyone hears this these days, is like all of these jobs that you apply for, they're all these online portals and they're using AI. It's very rare that your resume even gets to someone. And so that was surprising. Like, I know I'm qualified. I know I hit all the notes in, the job ad. My resume is good. I'm applying for so many roles. And how is it possible that it's not making it to the people that need to see it? And that was surprising to me.
Yeah, it is a big change from, the thousands, not even the 90s, the thousands in terms of the application process no longer feeling sort of a confidence that once HR has your information or recruitment has your information, you've done the part that you need to do. So that is definitely something that people are very surprised with.
Yes.
In terms of, and I think more so coming from larger companies that they have those facilities and capabilities to be able to screen additional people. The smaller ones may not always be able to do that. What do you think was kind of the turning point for you when you realized that was happening to figure out like, okay, what do I do next year? Like how am I going to do this?
Yeah, I kind of had to make a shift, right? Because I knew that I was very motivated to find something quickly. I knew it wasn't going to be quick, but I wanted to kind of put all of my energy into it. And I knew I had to make a change. So what I did was, before I applied for a role that I was interested in on their company's website, I first went through LinkedIn and tried to find someone that I was connected with that worked at the company or knew someone that worked at the company, tried to find a connection in some way to find a way to get my resume in front of someone, or at least have someone know that I'm interested in the role so that they can make sure that my resume gets to the right person in some way, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that that person would give my resume, but at least say that, give my name or in some way make it a little more likely that there's a chance that there would be someone looking at my resume. And so that's one change that I made. So before I applied online, because once you apply through the HR process, they might just reject you. And that actually did happen for a role that I actually interviewed for. I was rejected by the system, but the person that I was talking to was interested in me. So it's very strange. Also, just started talking to as many people as I could and sent out a mass email to all my contacts explaining kind of what I'm looking for and if they know anyone that might be able to help me in any way to reach out. And I was surprised that, even people that I hadn't seen or spoken to in over 10 years did actually give my name and my resume to someone, and I did get a call. So I think that, people should really think about who they know, who's in their network, even outside of their initial group of people, but like who do those people know, right? And it's okay to ask. Like people are actually willing to help. You just have to be willing to ask and putting yourself out there. And I know that that's hard, but that's what I did. And I got out of my comfort zone to do that. And I think that was really helpful too.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear that because a couple points I want to circle back on. One, that you didn't stop just based on a rejection message that you weren't selected. You kept going. And I think that like the rejection message does not feel good. Like it's not everybody's favorite email to get, right? So it's like a text message and rejection message, probably the same thing. So I think that the fact that you were willing to stay with it and you were very diligent in your kind of motivation to move forward is a huge separator. Because you don't know what happened when you were screened. If you were screened, and if, the other possibility is that it would be a position that they had an internal candidate for. And maybe that internal candidate said no. If you're still networking your way in, that gives you an advantage over folks who are like, they said no, so I'm just going to let this go. I'm going to walk away. So kudos to you for doing that and staying with it. And aggressively going after those opportunities you're interested in. The other piece of it is, and you just reminded me of this when you said that, people always say that they're surprised, and I'm in the same boat. They're surprised about the people who do help them versus the people who don't, right? Not to say that they don't, but the people who are more, we'll call it passionate about helping you. Did you find that experience?
Yes, I did. I think that the people that are closest to me know me really well. And their reaction to hearing that I got, laid off was, oh, you'll be fine. You're amazing. You're smart. You've worked at great companies. You'll be fine. And that's not helpful, right? But that's because they know me and they just have that, close connection with me. And they don't feel like they need to take that extra step to help me. But I think people who haven't really kind of been around that much, and they hear about a situation that they are more willing to help you. Even if you only worked with them, for a year or you met them at some event, right? You don't know what impact you had on them and what they think of you. And so it's just better to try, right? There's no harm in it. And so that's kind of the approach that I took.
That's a brilliant definition of that. Honestly, like I had not actually thought of that they're the people that are close to you are like, they're here to cheer you on because that's the role they've played in every other part of your life. Yeah. And so the people who are not as close are like, hey, I need to help this person. They're reaching out for a reason. And so, and I also love the fact that you said, you don't know what the impact is that you made on them.
Yes.
And I find so often like the confidence piece hurts when you are going through a career transition and you do tend to tell yourself a story about what does this person think of me? Let me find the tiny little thing that happened over who knows how many years ago that they might be clinging on to, at some point. So forget that stuff. Let's go talk to people and be people. And that's exactly what you did. That was fantastic.
Yeah, I think the goal is to, find a new job, right? And so focusing on that and kind of setting everything else to the side is
Yep.
another thing that I did,
hmm
which was helpful.
hmm
Yeah.
And to be very, very frank, like 70% of the population at some point will go through a career transition that they did
Yeah,
not start. And
exactly.
so people are going to go through it. And the
Hmm.
people who help typically have done it before. And the folks who may not help as much, and I'm not talking like the immediate circle, probably will need help at some point, and they'll learn that. And you'll be there for them because, like, you know what it's like. So
Exactly.
that's excellent. You
Hmm.
also were very diligent. Like I said, you were like the poster child of career transition when you were working with me. Very
Thank
diligent
you.
in terms of organizing
Yeah.
your companies and
Hmm.
organizing how you're approaching them. Can you share a little bit about like how you did that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think, you were very helpful to me in that you gave me a tool that I needed, right? Which was
hmm
this spreadsheet that
hmm
every time you applied for a job, you put the name of the company, which resume version you used, right? Like
hmm
what contact you sent it to, or who do you know there, and like the status of it. Because when you're in the zone of like applying and you're
hmm
excited and you want to apply for as many as you can,
hmm
there were jobs I applied for that I got a call about an interview like weeks later, and I had forgotten like what resume did I send them, right? Like,
Yep.
so keeping things organized really helps in that sense
hmm
where when you do get that call, you're prepared
hmm
to kind of, approach it the right way because every resume is tailored for the job as it should be.
hmm
Um, and then also just kind of being organized in the sense where I had a really, good routine that I had set up for myself, right? Everyone was telling me, "Oh, you're so lucky you get some time off to rest or to do some stuff fun for yourself." And I was like, "No, I don't need to." And then I don't think that's the right way because I
hmm
think that if you want to get a job in this market, you have to be dedicated to it. You have to make it a job, right? And so I created a routine for myself where every morning I woke up, I got ready as if I was getting ready for work. I identified a really great YouTube song track, whatever you want to call it, that was motivating for me. So it was
I love
like,
it.
positive, and it kind of was like it set the tone for the day. And so I had that in the background when I started my day. And so I would kind of go through my process of going through my emails, going through LinkedIn, identifying roles I'm interested in, and then identifying which ones I was going to target that day to apply for. And then also had a list of people in my circle, right, that I wanted to reach out to, follow up with, etc. So I think having that routine, very helpful. And
hmm
also making sure that I had continued, to get good sleep, to exercise, get outside and, still do those things that are good for like my mental health. So I think
Yes.
those pieces together, um, really helped. And I think the last one I would say is, and I think this is the most important thing, and I don't know if you can see the sign behind me, but it's all about kind of having that positive energy
hmm
around you. So I really focus on that, like making sure the people around me, the people I'm speaking to, right,
hmm
are giving me positive reinforcement. If there's anyone that has negative energy, I kind of just stayed away from them during this time. I asked my family and friends to not ask me every day, like, did you find a job or what's the status? Because that
hmm
would give me anxiety and stress. And so I asked them if you could just not ask me anything. I will tell you when I have good news to share, but in the
hmm
meantime I just need your support. So being really clear with my circle of what I needed in order to succeed, right? And so taking control of that, because this process is like you really feel like you're not in control of anything, and so it's important to kind of identify what you can control in order to help
hmm
you get through the process. So that's what I would share with that.
So smart. I mean,
Yeah.
one of the areas where people really struggle is actually mental health in going through
Yes.
career transition. It is something
Mm-hmm.
that pretty much everybody goes through.
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah.
one of the things that really is effective and useful is having that schedule
Yeah.
and not having the schedule turn into job search for 12 hours.
Right.
Having the get outside, the exercise, the get some air, the have things you
Mhm.
enjoy.
Yeah.
Um, so those are really good ideas, and glad that they all were tools that you could operate with in order
Yeah.
to conduct your search. So that's fantastic and a great reminder to our audience that like, hey,
Yeah.
we'll ask you for a snapshot at some point of that picture, and we'll include it in the show notes because that's a great one.
Yeah.
So that sounds good. What about in terms of the actual like preparing for interviews?
Yeah.
Like that, I know you spent quite a bit of time on as well. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. Okay. So in this era of interviewing remotely for the most part, right, we have a huge advantage in the sense where, at least for people like me who are visual learners, I learn by writing things down and I just remember certain words. And when I see that word, it reminds me of whatever that answer is or that topic is. So what I did was first, of course, as I prepared for an interview, research the company. And so have like a fact sheet about the company, right? Like, not just the history of it, but like also look in what's new about the company, what's in the news in the last week about them. So just know little tidbits. Then I research the individuals that I'm interviewing with, right? So looking through LinkedIn or however you can to get information about that person, their history, how long they've been at the company. So that's kind of the second layer. And the third layer, of course, is, learning about the job itself and finding things that I had experience with that I could tie back. So what I did was I created one sheet of paper that was to the left of me, which was like a cheat sheet of like the company and the person that I'm interviewing with. And then on the right is a little cheat sheet about myself and my experience and how I can tie it to the role. The biggest one in the middle for me, like a big post-it, was why I want that specific job, because that's what they care about, right? They don't want some generic answer. They want to know why you want that specific job at that specific company. So having like colorful Post-its kind of surrounding me around the screens. So I have two screens here, right, as I'm interviewing. And so it's just like little reminders of things, right? That if they ask about some, I don't know, let's just pick like, what's your experience with this regulation or this type of agreement? And so I kind of had like a few words there to remind myself of, hey, you've worked on these 3 types of agreements in the past, so you can remember to talk about that. So I think just feeling like I did as much as I could to prepare myself for whatever was thrown at me really helped. But I think really those kind of layers of attack for each job and the research that you need to do to kind of get all that information and in a way that you can easily remember or digest is really helpful.
Yeah. That's excellent. I love the tools that you used through the process as well. And it's funny, we've gone from an age of people saying like, is it okay if I take notes in the interview? Yeah. You better be taking notes in the interview, to now like having like Post-its and all kinds of things around that can help you as an aid. Like, why not use all the advantages that you can?
Exactly. Yeah. And, I feel like at least for me, that's what worked. Others are not as visual. Maybe that's too distracting for someone, right? But find what it is that you feel will get you as confident as possible in that room or that moment that you're being interviewed. So
yeah. It's interesting. A lot of what I've been reading recently has been about the fact that because we have the technology that we do today, and I'm not saying that AI is the answer, but the actual can you do the job part of the interview is kind of over. Really what they're looking for is fit. How are you going to fit this team? How are you going to fit the organization? Why do you want to fit the organization and the team? Right. And you really need to be able to emphasize that is something that's important to you and that you've done your homework.
Exactly.
If you walk
it's very obvious when you haven't.
Yes. Yeah. If they start asking you questions about you and you're not tying them back to that organization, you're not all that interested. That's just the bottom line. Right. So yeah, the preparation is huge. Excellent. Okay. So what was the biggest kind of relief surprise, we'll call it? Like, what was the point in time where you were like, okay, this is going to work out. I've got this. I feel confident in the fact that this whole search thing is going to work for me.
I mean, at one point, there's a gap. There's like weeks where you don't hear anything, right? And then all of a sudden, like it comes to a point where you're seeing interest from a lot of different people. And so I think that's when I realized, that fear I had of it's going to take 6 months to find a job went away. And I just knew that, I had what it took to make this happen. I just needed to stick with it, right? Because it's really easy to get discouraged if you get a rejection, if someone doesn't reach back out to you and you expected them to. And so once I started kind of seeing, there was a point, I think you and I were talking, and it was like, oh, wow, you have like 6-7 different companies you're interviewing
Exactly,
with.
yes.
So that's kind of the point where I felt like, you know what, I think something good will come from this. And so it was a sense of relief in that sense. Yeah.
Are there any tricks or tools you would say you used to keep yourself on the path of, I just need to stay with this?
I think the best thing for me, and I would recommend it for anyone, is to really remind yourself of what you actually want, not what other people think you should want, but actually sit down and think about what it is that you want and why, and keep visualizing that. I think visualizing it is so important. This is something I learned from my mom many years ago. And, even when this first happened to me and I was really devastated and I was really not in a good mental place for a few weeks, I did force myself to take a pause and think about what it is that I actually wanted for my next role. And then throughout the process, kind of try to remind myself of that and keep visualizing that. Because it's really easy to get sidetracked. It's really easy to say, oh, this is too difficult, or maybe I should just give in and kind of do something like something that's easier. So keeping that visual in your mind is helpful.
It really is. And I think that the visualization is important. Also, the feeling that half of our listeners right now, our watchers right now, are going to probably throw something at the screen. But there's a lot of people who actually don't get the opportunity to pause in their career and figure out what's next. And so what I'll tell those of you who are in career transition is that there's a little bit of a silver lining here, which is you get to say, hold up, I want to make sure I'm on the right track here, or I didn't like that track. I was in the track because it was there. I can go to this track now. And so that's something that's important, and it can still be done by really going through the process that you did and, refitting your resume, looking at the descriptions, making sure you're chasing folks that can connect you to opportunities and getting the messaging out there. And so that was excellent. Okay. So this has been really fun to kind of pick your brain in terms of things that worked well for you. Anything that I haven't asked that you think you want to share with the audience in terms of your process?
I think we've covered the most important pieces, but I would just add this final thing because it came up yesterday. I was talking to a friend who wants to make a transition as well. The job descriptions are ridiculous. There's job descriptions that I would say, like, within, my own research that I've done, most people won't qualify for all those things. So don't just, say, oh, I'm not going to qualify, I'm not going to apply. You'll be surprised at what the person actually is looking for in that role, right? And so if you see anything in there that's A, you can tie it back to something you've done, or B, you feel like you could do it and explain why, apply.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's that's actually an angle to take when you're connecting to somebody in the organization is to reach out and say, hey, there's an awful lot going on with this job description.
Yeah.
Like, can you tell me what they're really looking for? Like, should I even bother to apply? What are they really looking for? And then you'll get the actual meaning of the description. But there is definitely a component right now. And it's something that I saw an awful lot of on the recruitment side in the about 2008-9 years, where we were taking as many jobs as possible and putting them together because they didn't quite have the budget to afford 3 or 4 people, and then saying one person can do this. And then the person would be onboarded, and for 6 months it would go great. And all of a sudden they'd be like, well, they don't have any depth around these areas, which not surprising. So, and then of course there was the big flip flop of it being more of an employee market. And so a lot of those things changed, but yes, absolutely. You may not be able to check every box. You probably shouldn't, because if you could, you would be bored out of your mind when you start that job.
That's a great point.
Yeah. And so, like, figure out what you're really good at. Have that kind of conversation on the side with people who are there to figure out what's the actual pain point.
Right.
And then begin to move forward. Last question.
Yeah.
Because this is one we get a lot. what would you say your cadence was in terms of outreach to people? So a lot of people are surprised sometimes when I'm like, well, you can probably, message them again or call them or text them or whatever. What would you say your cadence was to people when you were working with them?
I think once a week, like if they said, we'll get back to you on something and I don't hear back for a week, then I would follow up. And if there was an interview and I sent like a thank you note or something and, it's been a week, I haven't heard anything as a follow up, I would do that. So my cadence was about a week. Yeah.
Okay, good. Excellent. All right. Last question. We ask this to all of our guests, right? Last question.
Yeah.
And it's really more because I like to understand how people end up in the careers that they're in. I find it very interesting to myself. What is your why? Why do you do what you do?
For me, it's always been, I love solving problems and I like helping people solve problems that they're either too overwhelmed to do or, it's too difficult, and just helping people guiding people through difficult situations. So as in-house counsel, my goal is to help the business reach their goal. And in situations where there's deadlines and there's stress and there's pressure, right? Helping people see through the stressful time, right? Getting them through it. And being that calm voice in the room to be able to guide people to get to that conclusion or that end goal is what I love. I love doing that.
Excellent. I can absolutely see how you'd be fantastic at that, especially with how you went about your search process. So very diligent, very driven, very organized. So that was great. Excellent. Christine, I really appreciate you jumping on the show. And more so offering to share your experience with others that are going through it now.
Yes.
I think speaks volumes about you as a person as well.
Oh, thank you. So, I appreciate all the help you provided too, Kevin. So thank you.
It was a joy, honestly. So this has been Careering with Cameron. If you guys enjoyed the show, and I'm sure found lots of wisdom from our conversation with Christine, go ahead and give us 5 stars and share it with somebody who is going through the career transition process. This will be helpful to them. There's lots of good pieces of information in here that I guarantee you there is nobody going through career transition that doesn't need some help here. Please feel free to give us 5 stars. Make sure you subscribe, share it with somebody who needs it, and we'll see you next time.